Why did the wind seem to mock them that morning, as if it knew something the snipers did? 20 elite Marine snipers lay prone on the range, each one certain the miss hadn't been theirs. Not really. The gusts were violent, unpredictable, slicing sideways through Camp Pendleton like a living thing. One moment calm, the next feral, a kind of wind that exposed hesitation, punished ego, and reminded even veterans that mastery was never permanent. 20 shots, 20 failures. The target still stood untouched far downrange, center mass pristine. Men who had ended firefights with a single pull of the trigger now stared through scopes as if the earth itself had turned against them. Frustration settled in their shoulders. Pride stiffened their jaws. And then there was her. She arrived quietly like she always did, coffee balanced on a tray, apron tied tight, boots clean. Corporal Rowan Thorne moved through the range with practiced economy, eyes down, steps measured. No one noticed her at first. They never did. She preferred it that way. She handed out cups without spilling a drop despite the wind. The snipers joked, complained, laughed to bleed off tension. One of them said something careless, something small, something that landed heavier than he intended. I bet even the mess hall cook could do better. The laughter wasn't cruel, just tired, but Rowan felt it anyway, not as insult but as recognition, like a door cracking open to a room she'd sealed shut years ago. She looked at the rifle, and for a moment the world narrowed. She hadn't touched one in years, had promised herself she wouldn't, had built a quiet life out of repetition and discipline and silence. Cooking was safe, predictable, rifles were not. Still, the wind brushed her cheek, and her body remembered things her mind tried to forget. She stepped forward before doubt could catch her. "I'll take that bet." The laughter died slowly, not because of her words but because of how she moved, calm, certain, like someone answering a call she'd been avoiding. She knelt beside the rifle, hands steady. No hesitation, no curiosity, familiarity. And that was when the unease began. Why did a cook settle behind a precision weapon like she'd done it 1,000 times before? Why did the gunnery sergeant feel his breath catch? Rowan breathed once, twice, 3 times. Then she fired. The bullet flew for seconds that felt like years. When it struck center mass, the range went silent. And in that silence, something long buried began to wake. How does someone disappear after doing the impossible? Rowan didn't celebrate, didn't smile, didn't wait for approval. She cleared the weapon, returned it exactly as she'd found it, and walked away while 20 professionals stared after her like witnesses to a miracle they weren't sure they'd seen. By the time the whispers started, questions, theories, disbelief, she was already gone, back to steel counters and cutting boards, hiding behind routine. But some things don't stay buried. That evening the summons came. She recognized the name before she reached the office door. Gunnery Sergeant Callahan didn't waste words. Neither did the man waiting inside. Elijah Stone looked like time itself had tried and failed to break him. His eyes lingered on Rowan a moment too long, not with curiosity, but memory. "You look like him," he said. Her jaw tightened. She hadn't heard her father spoken of like that in years, not since the folded flag, not since the lie they'd given her about how he died. Stone didn't soften the truth, he laid it bare. Her father hadn't died on patrol. He died hunting a monster no one wanted to acknowledge existed, an arms dealer, a ghost hiding behind legality and distance. And now that ghost was alive, planning something worse. Stone slid the notebook across the table. Her father's handwriting stared back at her like a voice from the past. Each page carried weight, not pride, not glory, responsibility. The burden of making choices no one else could. Rowan read until her eyes burned. Her father had known this moment would come, had believed in her even when she didn't believe in herself. That night sleep refused her. She lay awake, torn between the life she'd built and the legacy she'd inherited. By morning, the decision felt less like a choice and more like acceptance. "I'll do it," she said, "but when it's over, I disappear." Stone nodded. He'd expected nothing else. Some people are born quiet because the world will someday demand everything from them. What does it take to become someone you've spent years trying not to be? Training stripped Rowan down to muscle memory and truth. The desert didn't care about her doubts. The mountains didn't care about her grief. Only results mattered. Each shot rebuilt something she'd buried, not anger, not vengeance, precision, patience, responsibility. Her father's rifle came back into her hands like a promise kept. "Aim true, Dad." She learned its moods, its limits, learned how thin air lied, how wind played tricks, how fear disguised itself as urgency. Stone pushed her hard, not because he doubted her, because he trusted her. And still, when the time came, he gave her an out. "You can walk away." She didn't. Because some gifts don't let you pretend forever. Why does the hardest moment always come after the mission begins? The shot itself was clean, final, necessary. But the plan shattered seconds later. Ambush, chaos, friendly voices turning urgent, men pinned down because someone else had already decided violence was acceptable. Rowan could have left. That had been the agreement. Instead, she stayed. Because skill without responsibility is just talent. She became what the ridge needed her to be: calm, invisible, relentless. Each shot wasn't rage, it was protection, measured, controlled, heavy. When the final target fell, the valley exhaled. And so did she. What remains after silence returns? Rowan left no trace, not on the ridge, not in the reports, not in the stories that would circulate half-true and exaggerated. She returned to her kitchen, to routine, to anonymity. Stone never contacted her again. But sometimes, when the wind picked up just right, she felt it on her cheek and remembered who she was and who she chose to be. Strength doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Why did the silence after that impossible shot feel heavier than the wind itself? Rowan walked back to the mess hall with the coffee tray balanced perfectly in her hands, the way she always did. Step, breathe, step, breathe. The world looked the same: dusty concrete, low buildings, Marines moving with routine purpose, but it felt subtly wrong, like the echo after a gunshot that never quite fades. Behind her, on the rifle range, 20 elite snipers were still standing where they were, staring at a target that no longer made sense. She didn't look back. That was Rule 1, you never look back. Inside the mess hall, the air was warm and thick with the smell of food prep and industrial cleaner. Stainless steel counters reflected fluorescent lights in dull, familiar patterns. This was her world, predictable, contained, safe. She set the tray down, rolled her shoulders once, and tied her apron as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But her hands were trembling. She tucked them under running water, letting the heat bite until the shaking eased. The sound of water filled the space where her thoughts threatened to rise. She focused on simple things: the scrape of a knife against a cutting board, the rhythm of chopping vegetables, the quiet banter of other Marines complaining about the day. No one here knew. And that was the point. Rowan had learned early how to disappear in plain sight. She had learned it as a teenager, standing behind a line of uniforms at a funeral while taps echoed across a cemetery. She had learned it in the years after, when people spoke about her father in softened voices, turning a complicated man into a simple story. She had learned it when she chose the mess hall instead of the range, routine instead of reminders. Cooking didn't ask questions. Rifles did. She kept her eyes down as she worked, but images slipped through anyway. The weight of the Barrett, the way the wind pressed against her skin, the pause between heartbeats, the impossible stillness right before the trigger broke. She hadn't planned to step forward. That was the lie she kept telling herself. The truth was harder. The truth was that some part of her had been waiting for an excuse, a careless joke, a challenge spoken aloud, a moment when pretending became heavier than remembering. Rowan. She flinched. Sergeant Mills stood at the end of the prep line, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't angry. That alone made her stomach tighten. "Gunny Callahan wants to see you," he said. "Now." The knife stopped mid-motion. Around her, the kitchen noise softened, curiosity rippling through the air. Rowan wiped her hands slowly, untying her apron with deliberate care. She could feel eyes on her back as she stepped away. This was it then. She had known the moment wouldn't stay contained. Moments like that never did. Callahan's office smelled faintly of old coffee and gun oil. He didn't offer her a seat, just studied her like he was looking at a map he hadn't seen in years and suddenly recognized. "You ever fired a rifle like that before, Corporal?" he asked. She met his gaze, calm, neutral, respectful. "No, gunnery, Sergeant." He nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer and didn't believe it for a second. "Funny thing," he said, "because I've seen a lot of shooters, and I've seen exactly one person handle wind like that." Her chest tightened. He didn't press, didn't accuse, didn't demand. That was the dangerous part. "Someone's on their way," Callahan continued. "Someone who knew your father." The name landed like a physical blow. Her father. Not Captain, not Ghost, her father. Rowan kept her face still, but something cracked beneath her ribs. She hadn't realized how carefully she'd boxed that word away until it was spoken out loud. "Dismissed," Callahan said gently. She left the office with her spine straight and her pulse hammering. That night she didn't go to the range, didn't go for a run, didn't distract herself with noise. She sat alone on her bunk, hands folded, staring at the far wall while memories crept in around the edges. Her father teaching her to read wind by watching grass instead of flags. Her father correcting her breathing with 2 fingers pressed lightly between her shoulders. Her father's voice, calm even when the world was. She hadn't fired a rifle since the day she decided she wouldn't become him. At 1900 hours, her phone vibrated. One message. "My office be on time." The building was older, tucked far enough from the main traffic to feel intentional. Rowan knocked once. The voice inside told her to enter. Elijah Stone rose when he saw her. He was older than she expected, broader, carried like a man who had spent his life standing between danger and others. His eyes held a familiar stillness, not cold but disciplined. They sat across from each other, silence stretching. "You shoot like him," Stone said finally. Rowan swallowed. "You didn't know him well enough to say that." Stone didn't flinch. "I knew him better than anyone." He slid the notebook across the table. Her breath caught. She hadn't seen it since she was 16, hadn't known it still existed. Her father's handwriting stared back at her from the worn cover, steady and precise. "You weren't supposed to find out like this," Stone said. "But you made that impossible shot today, and some doors don't close again once they're opened." Rowan didn't touch the notebook, not yet. "They lied to you," Stone continued, "about how he died, about what he was doing. They wrapped it in ceremony and silence and hoped time would take care of the rest." Her jaw tightened, and did it. Stone met her gaze. "No." He told her everything. About the man her father had been hunting, about the mission that never officially existed, about betrayal dressed up as procedure, about a last stand that bought time for others at the cost of one life. Rowan listened without interrupting, each word pressing deeper than the last. Grief resurfaced, raw and sharp, but beneath it was something else. Clarity. "Why tell me now?" she asked quietly. Stone turned the laptop toward her. A photograph filled the screen, a man older now but unmistakable, alive, comfortable, untouched by the weight he'd caused. "Because he's still breathing," Stone said. "And because today I watched you do something only one other person ever could." Rowan finally reached for the notebook. Her fingers brushed the cover like it might disappear. "I'm not him," she said. "No," Stone agreed. "You're better positioned." Silence settled again, heavy, honest. "You don't have to do this," Stone said. "But if you do, it won't be for revenge. It will be to finish something that never should have been left undone." Rowan opened the notebook. Inside were entries written in a voice she'd forgotten how much she missed. Calm, thoughtful, burdened but resolute, and near the end, a line that made her chest ache. "Rowan will understand someday." She closed the notebook slowly. Outside, the wind rose again, rattling the window like a reminder. She had built a quiet life, a safe one, a small one. But some legacies don't let you stay small. Rowan lifted her eyes to Stone. "When do we start?" Why did the rifle feel heavier the second time she touched it, like it remembered everything she was trying not to? The range was quiet in a way Rowan hadn't experienced in years. Not the empty quiet of a closed facility, but the intentional kind. The kind reserved for things that mattered. The sun sat low over the California desert, washing everything in pale gold, and the wind moved differently here, less chaotic, more patient. It waited. Rowan lay prone on the mat, elbows dug into gravel, her father's rifle resting against her shoulder. She hadn't realized how much she'd missed this until now. Not the shooting, the stillness. Elijah Stone stood several meters behind her, watching without speaking. He hadn't rushed this moment, hadn't offered encouragement or correction. He knew better. The first shot after a long absence wasn't about mechanics. It was about permission. Rowan exhaled slowly and lifted her cheek from the stock. "I haven't done this since before he died," she said. Stone nodded. "I know." She rolled onto her side, staring up at the sky. It looked impossibly wide out here, like Montana. Like the places her father used to take her before the world had narrowed into grief and choices. "What if I can't stop once I start again?" she asked quietly. Stone didn't answer right away. He crouched beside her instead, resting his forearms on his knees. "Your father asked me something once," he said, "after a mission went bad, after he took a shot that saved 6 people and haunted him for years." Rowan turned her head slightly. "He asked me if it was possible to be good at this and still be good," Stone continued. "I told him I didn't know, I still don't, but I know this, people like you don't lose control, they carry it. That's the difference." Rowan closed her eyes. She could still hear her father's voice correcting her breathing when she rushed, still feel his hand on her shoulder, grounding her. She rolled back into position. "Let's do it," she said. Stone stepped back. Rowan settled in, adjusting the bipod, aligning her body with the rifle the way muscle memory demanded. Her breathing slowed naturally, the way it always had. Not forced, not counted, just found. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked gently, familiar as a heartbeat. Downrange, the steel target rang. Rowan didn't smile, didn't react at all. She chambered another round. Again. Another clean hit. By the 5th shot, Stone was nodding. By the 10th, he was certain. She hadn't lost it. If anything, she was sharper. They trained for hours that day, not pushing distance yet, not rushing, just fundamentals, wind reading, breathing, resetting after each shot. Stone corrected her only when necessary, letting her rediscover her own instincts. As the sun dipped lower, Rowan finally sat back, removing her ear protection. "Why now?" she asked. "Why not years ago?" Stone considered her carefully. "Because you weren't ready." "For what?" "For choosing this instead of being consumed by it." The words stayed with her as they packed up. That night, Rowan sat alone in the small, unmarked building Stone used as a temporary operations hub. A single desk lamp illuminated the worn notebook in front of her. Her father's handwriting filled the pages like a conversation interrupted by time. She read slowly, not like a mission log but like a confession. He wrote about doubt, about shots that saved lives and shots that cost sleep, about responsibility weighing more than recoil ever could, about teaching her to shoot not because he wanted her to become him, but because he wanted her to survive a world that didn't forgive hesitation. Near the end, she found a passage she'd never read before. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make it back. I hope you didn't become me just because you felt you had to. I hope you chose when the moment mattered, not before, not after. The gift isn't the shooting. It's knowing when to stop. Rowan closed the notebook and pressed her palm flat against it. I didn't want this, she whispered to the empty room. But wanting had never been the requirement. The next morning, training escalated. Stone didn't warn her, just set the target farther, changed elevation, introduced time pressure, wind she couldn't predict, cold mornings that stiffened fingers and punished impatience. Rowan struggled, not with accuracy, but with restraint. She rushed a shot once, missed by inches. Stone said nothing, just waited. She adjusted, slowed, breathed. Hit. That's the difference, Stone said. Skill forgives nothing, ego forgives even less. By the third day, exhaustion crept in. Muscles ached. Old calluses split and reformed. Her body remembered pain she hadn't felt since she'd left this life behind. And still, she felt more awake than she had in years. On the fourth night, as they reviewed satellite images and terrain data, Rowan finally asked the question that had been circling since the beginning. What happens after? Stone looked up from the screen. After the shot, he asked. After everything, she said. Stone leaned back. That's up to you. You can walk away, or you can keep walking forward, but either way, you don't get to pretend this didn't happen. Rowan nodded. She wasn't pretending anymore. The mountains came next, thin air, long hikes, waiting hours for the right wind window, shots that demanded trust more than confidence. On the sixth day, Stone handed her a rifle case she hadn't seen yet. Inside was her father's restored weapon. Rowan froze. The wood stock was worn smooth, familiar. Her fingers traced it without permission, memories flooding back so fast it hurt. He carved something inside, Stone said quietly. Rowan opened the hidden panel and saw the words etched carefully, lovingly. Aim true. She swallowed hard. That night, alone on the ridge, she lay awake under a sky crowded with stars. The rifle rested beside her, the notebook under her pack. She wasn't angry anymore. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She was preparing. Because somewhere, a man who thought himself untouchable was still breathing. And because sometimes, silence only holds until someone decides to break it. Why did the valley look so peaceful when she knew it was about to become a grave? Rowan reached her firing position long before dawn. The hike had taken nearly 2 hours through uneven terrain, her breath fogging in the cold mountain air, boots crunching softly over frost-slick stone. She moved without a headlamp for the final stretch, letting memory guide her feet. The ridge rose gently at first, then sharpened into a rocky outcrop that overlooked the valley like a quiet witness. Paradise Valley lived up to its name in the early light. The ranch below slept beneath a pale sky, buildings arranged with deliberate symmetry, fields stretching wide and innocent, cattle moving slowly through the haze. Smoke drifted from a distant chimney. A normal place. That was what made it dangerous. Evil always hid best where it didn't look like it belonged. Rowan eased into position, spreading her mat with careful hands, arranging her equipment in a ritual she'd performed hundreds of times during training. The rifle rested against her shoulder, solid and familiar. Her father's rifle, not a symbol, a tool. He had never believed in symbols, only responsibility. She checked her watch. Still hours to wait. Waiting was the hardest part, not because of boredom but because it left space for thought, and thought was dangerous. The cold crept in slowly, biting at her fingers despite the gloves. She shifted just enough to keep blood flowing, careful not to disturb her hide. Below her, the valley woke piece by piece. Vehicles appeared near the main house. Men stepped out, stretching, laughing, carrying rifles without the weight of knowing what they were for. Stone's voice came through her earpiece, low and steady. Multiple vehicles inbound, counts climbing, looks like the militia contingent. Rowan acknowledged softly. Her heart rate rose, then settled. She learned to let adrenaline pass through her instead of taking hold. Panic narrowed vision. Calm widened it. She scanned the ranch slowly, mapping movement, identifying patterns. Guards rotated positions with the confidence of men who believed they were untouchable. That belief would be their weakness. She didn't hate them. That surprised her. Hatred was loud, distracting. This felt quieter, heavier. At 12:43, the black pickup emerged. Rowan felt it before she saw it, a subtle tightening beneath her ribs, the instinct her father had called the shift, when everything suddenly mattered. The truck stopped near a shipping container. 3 men exited, 2 security. One older, broader, carrying himself with the ease of someone who'd survived things others hadn't. Dmitry Vyulov. Rowan centered him in her scope. The distance read back steady, wind quartering right, temperature dropping slightly. She adjusted without thinking, letting training take over. She didn't imagine his face as her father's killer. She imagined the missiles instead, 50 of them, airliners, helicopters, people who would never know why the sky betrayed them. Her finger rested against the trigger guard. Stone's voice returned. Target exposed, you have the shot. Rowan exhaled slowly. This was the moment she'd spent years running from, the moment her father had known would come. She didn't whisper a goodbye. She squeezed. The rifle recoiled gently, familiar as a remembered heartbeat. Through the scope, she watched the bullet fly, its vapor trail faint but visible against the pale sky. Time stretched. 4 seconds that held everything she was and everything she'd lost. The impact was clean. Vyulov collapsed without ceremony, his body folding into the earth as if it had always belonged there. Rowan stayed on scope, steady, professional. Confirmation wasn't cruelty, it was responsibility. Target down, she said, confirmed. For 2 seconds, nothing moved. Then the valley exploded into confusion. Men shouted, weapons came up. Someone screamed orders in a language Rowan didn't recognize. Vyulov's body was dragged toward cover. Stone's team surged in from 3 directions. And then the shooting started. Not wild, not panicked. Coordinated. Rowan's stomach dropped. This is wrong, she said immediately. Stone, this isn't reaction fire, they're set. The words barely left her mouth before muzzle flashes answered. Rounds sparked off metal. One of Stone's men went down hard, rolling behind a vehicle. Another was pinned, trapped by overlapping fire. Contact, Stone barked. We're taking fire, this is a trap. Rowan's mind snapped into a different mode. The plan had ended. Reality had begun. She could leave. That had always been the agreement. One shot, disappear. Her extraction route waited behind her, quiet and untouched. Stone's voice cut through the chaos. Rowan, extract now, that's an order. She didn't respond. She swung her rifle left, scanning for shooters. Found one on a barn roof, prone, firing with controlled bursts. Another beside him, a third repositioning. Her rangefinder beeped softly. Stone, she said, calm despite the pounding in her chest. I have eyes on 3 shooters on the barn roof, talking you onto targets. Negative, Stone snapped. You need to go. Rowan fired. The first shooter fell backward without a sound. The second tried to roll, too slow. The third vanished over the far side of the roof. Right flank clear, Rowan said. Move. There was a pause. Then Stone's voice returned, different now. Copy, stand by. From that moment, there was no pretending she wasn't part of this. Targets appeared everywhere once she knew how to look. Men flanking, men setting up heavy weapons, men who thought distance made them safe. Rowan made it irrelevant. Each shot was deliberate, calculated, controlled. She didn't count bodies. She counted threats removed. Minutes blurred, her shoulder bruised beneath the stock, her fingers burned from cold and recoil. Brass piled beside her like silent witnesses. Ammo check, she said between shots. Say again. I've got 8 rounds left. A pause, then Stone, make them count. She did. When Stone called the final target, second floor window, extreme distance, Rowan felt the weight of it settle fully. This was beyond doctrine, beyond expectation. This was trust. She took her time. Ranged, calculated, watched the wind ripple through trees across the valley, reading its story like her father had taught her. She breathed, found the space between heartbeats, and fired. The bullet arced impossibly high, then descended like judgment. The window went still. For a moment, the entire valley held its breath. Then Stone's voice broke through, quiet with awe. Target down. The shooting stopped soon after. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Rowan dismantled her rifle with practiced speed, policing every casing, erasing every trace. When she rose to leave, the ridge looked exactly as it had hours before. Untouched. She hiked away without looking back. Again. Because some work doesn't need witnesses. And some strength doesn't announce itself. It simply finishes the job and disappears into the quiet. Why did the silence after the last shot feel louder than the gunfire ever had? Rowan didn't stop moving until her legs burned and the ridge fell away behind her. She followed the extraction route without checking it twice, trusting the map she'd memorized and the instincts that had never failed her before. Trees swallowed her shape. Rocks erased her outline. By the time the first helicopter thumped overhead, she was already descending into shadow. Her breathing stayed controlled, in through the nose, out through the mouth. She learned long ago that panic didn't arrive all at once. It waited. It crept in when you thought you were safe. At the rally point, she knelt and waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. Her hands began to shake again, the same way they had in the mess hall days ago. Only now there was no hot water to steady them, no apron to hide behind. Stone's voice finally crackled in her earpiece. Team is clear. We're moving to secondary exfil. Rowan closed her eyes for one brief second. No casualties. She hadn't let herself hope for that. Copy, she replied. I'm still green. She rose and moved, every step suddenly heavier. Not from exhaustion, from the weight of what had just happened. The valley, the shot, the men she'd never meet, the ones who wouldn't be going home. By the time she reached the secondary pickup zone, dawn was breaking. Pale light spilled across the mountains, washing everything clean in a way that felt almost insulting. The world looked too normal for what it had just absorbed. The helicopter door slid open. Stone was inside, helmet off, face drawn and quiet. When he saw her, he didn't smile. He just nodded. That was enough. Rowan climbed in and sat on the floor, back against the hull. The vibration traveled straight through her spine. She rested her rifle between her knees, hands clasped around it like an anchor. No one spoke during the flight. When the base finally came into view, Rowan felt something loosen in her chest, not relief exactly. Permission to feel later. They landed behind a hangar far from the main traffic. No fanfare. No witnesses. The team dispersed quickly, melting back into routine as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. Stone walked with Rowan toward the small operations building. "You disobeyed a direct order," he said quietly. "Yes, sir." "You saved 3 lives doing it." "Yes, sir." He stopped walking. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, "You understand I can't put that in a report." "I know." Stone studied her face, searching for something. Fear, pride, regret. He found all 3. "Go get cleaned up," he said finally. "We'll talk later." Rowan nodded and turned away. The shower water hit her skin like needles. She stood under it without moving, letting it wash over her until the smell of gun oil and sweat faded. Only then did the images start to come. The way Vyulov had folded. The pause before the second shot. The moment she'd chosen not to leave. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the floor, pressing her forehead against the tile. She hadn't cried when her father died. She cried now. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears that carried years with them, for the girl who had learned to shoot before she learned how to grieve, for the woman who had tried to disappear, for the cost that never showed up on mission briefs. When the tears stopped, Rowan stayed there a while longer, breathing through the ache. Then she stood. She dressed slowly and returned to the mess hall out of habit more than intention. The place looked exactly the same as it always had. Same counters, same smells, same noise. Someone laughed near the back. Someone complained about powdered eggs. Rowan stepped behind the counter and started prepping vegetables. Her hands were steady now. Mills glanced over at her, brow furrowed. "You good?" Rowan nodded. "Yeah." It wasn't a lie. Later that day, Stone found her there. He didn't sit, didn't order food, just leaned against the counter watching her work. "You don't belong here anymore," he said. Rowan didn't look up. "I never really did." "You could transfer," he continued. "Back to ops, training, advisory role, you've earned that." She finally met his eyes. "And if I don't want it?" Stone shrugged. "Then you go back to cooking, and no one ever knows what you did." Rowan considered that. The quiet life, the safety of anonymity, the relief of not being asked again. Her father's notebook waited in her locker. "So why tell me?" she asked. "Why not just let me fade back in?" Stone's gaze softened. "Because some people don't need to be used, they need to be trusted." Rowan nodded slowly. That night she walked the perimeter alone. The base hummed with routine. Guards rotated shifts. Lights flickered on and off in distant buildings. Life continued. She stopped near the edge of the range, where the targets stood in neat rows. She remembered standing there days ago, coffee tray in hand, invisible. She wasn't invisible anymore. That realization scared her more than the mission had. Stone joined her a few minutes later, handed her a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" she asked. "A list of names," he said. "People your father protected, people who are still alive because of him." Rowan unfolded it slowly. Dozens of names stared back at her. Ordinary names, teachers, pilots, aid workers, kids. Lives she would never see. "This is the part no one talks about," Stone said. "The part that makes it worth carrying." Rowan folded the paper carefully and tucked it into her pocket. "I don't want to become a weapon," she said. Stone nodded. "Good, weapons don't get to choose." She looked back at the range one last time. "I'll help," she said, "but on my terms." Stone smiled, not wide, not proud, just relieved. "Fair enough." As Rowan walked back toward the mess hall, the sky deepened into evening. She tied on her apron again, the fabric familiar and grounding. She was still a cook. She was also something else now. Not a legend, not a ghost. Just a woman who had stepped forward when it mattered, and understood that strength didn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just stayed quiet and stayed ready. Why did the quiet feel different now? Less like hiding, more like choosing. Weeks passed without ceremony. No debriefs that mattered. No medals. No whispered congratulations. The base absorbed the mission the way it absorbed everything else, quietly, efficiently, and without sentiment. Rowan returned to her routines, but the routines no longer carried the same weight. She woke before dawn, not because she had to, but because her body remembered a different rhythm. She cooked breakfast for Marines who would never know her name beyond what was stitched onto her uniform. She smiled when appropriate. She listened more than she spoke. But something inside her had shifted. Not sharpened, not hardened. Aligned. Stone didn't come back for her right away. That was deliberate. He understood what she needed more than she did herself, space to decide whether that ridge had been an exception or a turning point. On the range, the targets stood untouched most days. Rowan walked past them during perimeter checks, feeling no pull, no urgency. She didn't need to prove anything anymore. That was new. That was fragile. One evening, she sat alone outside the mess hall, watching the sun sink low and stain the sky with color. Mills joined her, dropping onto the step beside her with a tired grunt. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked casually. Rowan considered the question longer than it deserved. "Sometimes," she said. "Yeah," Mills nodded. "Me too." They sat in companionable silence, the kind built on shared exhaustion rather than shared secrets. When he finally stood and headed back inside, Rowan remained where she was, feeling the warmth fade from the concrete beneath her. She thought of her father then, not as a shooter, not as a symbol, but as a man who had come home tired and quiet and still made time to teach her how to read the wind. She understood him better now. Stone returned on a morning that smelled like rain. He didn't summon her. He found her where she belonged, sleeves rolled up, moving with practiced ease between pots and prep stations. He waited until she finished before speaking. "There's a program," he said. "Small, off the books. It's not about pulling triggers." Rowan dried her hands slowly. "What is it about?" "Judgment," Stone replied. "Knowing when not to act, teaching restraint as much as skill." That caught her attention. "You want me to train snipers?" she asked. "I want you to teach people how to carry the weight," he said, "because you didn't chase it, and because you walked away when you could have stayed." Rowan looked around the kitchen, the place that had saved her by giving her somewhere to disappear. "I won't do this full time," she said. Stone nodded. "I wouldn't ask you to." "I won't lie to them," she continued. "I won't tell them it gets easier." "Good," he said. "It doesn't." They shook hands, not like soldiers, but like two people agreeing to trust each other with something fragile. The first class was small, 6 candidates, all experienced, all confident, all expecting tactics and ballistics. Rowan didn't give them any of that on the first day. She asked them why they wanted to be there. The answers came quickly: protect, serve, be ready, do good. She listened, then she told them about the mess hall, about choosing the quiet job, about learning that usefulness didn't always look impressive, about the cost that never showed up on after-action reports. They didn't know what to do with that. Good. Over time, she taught them to shoot, yes, but more importantly, she taught them to stop, to wait, to question the moment when taking the shot felt easiest. She watched some struggle. She watched others walk away. She respected both. Late one night, after the range had emptied, Rowan returned to her bunk and opened her father's notebook one last time. She'd read every page now, memorized every line. There was nothing new left to uncover. She wasn't looking for answers anymore. She was looking for closure. At the very back, on a page she'd somehow missed, she found a final entry, short, almost an afterthought. "If Rowan ever reads this, I hope she knows I didn't want her to be brave. I wanted her to be whole. Her chest tightened. She closed the notebook gently and placed it back where it belonged. The next morning, she requested a transfer. Not out of the mess hall. Out of the base. The new assignment didn't come with a title that mattered. Advisory, training support, logistics on paper. In reality, it was exactly what she'd asked for: room to move where she was needed and the freedom to say no. On her last day at the base, Rowan cooked one final meal. Nothing special, comfort food, familiar flavors, the kind of meal that didn't ask for attention. As the line moved forward, Marine after Marine thanked her without knowing why it felt important to do so. She accepted each thanks with a nod. Stone met her outside when she was done. He handed her a small envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "Nothing official," he said. "Just something I thought you'd want." Inside was a single photograph. Her father, younger than she remembered, standing beside Stone, both smiling, both tired. On the back, in Stone's handwriting, "He was proud of you long before he ever worried about you." Rowan swallowed hard. "Thank you," she said. Stone studied her for a moment. "You're not done," he said. "No," she agreed, "but I'm not chasing it anymore." They parted without drama. Rowan left the base before sunset, duffel bag light, shoulders unburdened. The road stretched ahead, unmarked and open. She didn't know where she'd end up. She just knew she would choose it. Because strength, she'd learned, wasn't about stepping forward every time your name was called. It was about knowing who you were when no one was watching. And sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts and then lets the quiet return.